As you might know, as was said in the introductions, I'm the Metro editor for El Diario, which is the longest standing Spanish language newspaper in the country. And while listening to the previous speakers, so exciting and thought-provoking comments, I couldn't help by wondering what is exactly the issues for our readership, the readership from El Diario's readership, which is now, as a journalist for the past almost a year, I'm training myself to think about the city from the perspective of our readers, and so I was wondering how I could define the progressiveness of the Blasio from the perspective of our particular constituency, which are working class immigrants mostly. I mean, the basic, our basic audience is made up of the newly arrived immigrants and the older ones who still read in Spanish, but our most thriving audience is the newly arrived. And although El Diario and most of our readers are, we are committed to a progressive agenda. It's part of a traditional mission of El Diario. When you look, and almost every day we are surprised to see the reactions of our readers through all the measurements that we have today through social media. It's almost immediate that we can know through their comments in Facebook or the comments on the stories, etc., on our website, what is exactly what the kind of things that that working class immigrants are really interested in. And many times we are surprised, and I will finish these initial remarks with the issue that I think strikes me the most, and which is the big elephant in the room of progressiveness in the country. So just to touch directly on the point that I was asked to develop tonight, which is immigration and citizenship, there is no doubt that the most important measure that de Blasio has undertaken in this regard has been the municipal ID, fulfilling the promise that he made in the campaign. What can also be said about that, and it's a particular concern that I have about this administration, is as you can see also these days with the launching of the pre-K, there is an eagerness of the administration to do those things that they can do, right? Or at least it seems easier to do and to produce a result than in other questions. So there was a real, effectiveness in getting out the measurement and enlisting, the support of all the. Of course, we have the most progressive city hall, I think, at least in my known history of the country. I don't know if more than 20 years ago it was any more progressive caucus than the one we have now. What you can say also is that my concern is in as to what degree is really this administration in the small details of implementation of things, right? So municipal IDs still, we don't know yet, not even how it's going to work, where you can get all this procedure, but what part of the administration is going to run that thing, right? So that is a criticism that I think, if you watch the administration, the reaction of the administration to this first snowstorms right after the mayor took office, etc., to this to the pre-K questions, I think that there is a serious question there as to maybe the administration is trying to rush into things with good reasons, but I think that this is still some fine-tuning there that is important to do. Just if not for other things, just to avoid the image of the well-intended but inefficient progressive, right? I think that's very important to keep that in track. There is another thing that, if you're not following very closely the issues that concerns working class immigrants and other working class the population living in welfare, is that this administration has introduced a number of very specific, measures that help bring in more welfare aid to undocumented immigrants, and through coupons, etc. This is very important since, as you know, undocumented immigrants are not covered by many of, not Obamacare, for instance. They are away from that. So, and the money that funds these programs is federal money. So it's not that much that the local administration can do. And to his credit, de Blasio has done a great job in that. I mean, trying to do whatever they can do. The same with affordable housing, with all the different programs that have been defunded in Congress. So, I think it's very important when we assess the results of this administration on a number of issues that has to do with funds that are decided in Congress in Washington, that we're really dealing with very difficult times, and just trying to make whatever they can do is even more commendable. Now, I think that the most important thing to me, at least at this point, and I think that most of us can agree on this, that the defining issue of the de Blasio administration so far is broken windows. I mean, the acid test to all these things, and it's been wonderfully put by all of you before me. It's a political balancing act, as the one he performed today, supporting Cuomo and Hochul for the gubernatorial primary, and of course this is politics, and even a progressive has to do politics if he wants to stay in the game. And so, but the thing is, in my view, that the way this discussion is finally going to impact the polls is showcasing or highlighting the racial divide that exists in the country and in the city. I think it was a report I read about 10 years ago in City Limits about how segregated the city is, the residential segregation of New York. And I was surprised. I was just beginning to live in New York, and I was surprised to see the data that was telling me that my experience of integration and friendliness and racial, wasn't supported by the strong and the strong data of how and when and where people actually lives, right? And so when I started knowing the city better and living more here, I understood the reality of that. And when you look at the polls, the reaction, for instance, towards the death of Gardner, the real divide is the racial divide. And we see how many people are in favor. 60% or more, I think, of white New Yorkers don't think that there should be presented any criminal charges towards the policeman that provoked the death of Gardner. Just looking at those, the polls that came out last week, I think that's the real deepest story of the two cities that we live in. And that is the most challenging thing, and we're not talking for good reasons, probably. I mean, the intractable nature of this issue in New York. I mean, it's easier to see this in Ferguson because it's so stark, dramatic, an absurd contrast. It's more difficult to pinpoint this in New York, where we have, this friendly environment until we take the train to Brownsville, right? Whatever. So, and how a mayor can transform this reality, what impact he can make in this historic divide and this historic problem, I think it can make for a bigger, probably the legacy of de Blasio will be hopefully measured in how much impact he can make in transforming this. And I think if he can take this this challenge to his whole political vision, he will have to demonstrate that he's able to move politically beyond the everyday, the simple political game of the balancing act of trying to please the right wing and the right wing, because this goes well beyond that. He will have to show, to demonstrate to himself and to all of us that he's a real leader, and that's the thing is still to be seen. I hope he can prove that. Thank you very much.